It's time. One face off to rule them all. For the foreseeable future. I don't know, probably. Anyway, Dr. Cinema here, analyzing, diagnosing movies, explaining them. Today is a movie face off day. Well, it's just movie face off time, don't have a specific day for it. Anyway, what are. Okay, so Star Wars is awesome. What's just as awesome? Lord of the Rings. So yeah, these are the two biggest franchises, or these two of the biggest franchises in American pop culture and American movie history. So, and people have been comparing them for a long time, trying to decide which one is better. So, I figured throw my 2 cents in the ring and decide to do a movie face-off. Now, keep in mind, I still, at the time of recording and uploading this, have not read any J.R.R. Tolkien books, so I'm not really going to try so much. So I'm not really going to bring up any differences from the books because I really don't really know what I'm talking about. But I do know some differences in the books based on what I've read from the internet and such. But anyway, it's just 2 sets of movies: the original trilogy, which means New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi, against the Lord of the Rings trilogy, Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, and The Return of the King. And we're going to be comparing them together. Now join me. Come with me on this face-off adventure, and your journey to the dark side will be complete. Should probably take this hood off. So anyway, 5 rounds. Let's get to it. Round 1. Story. Now, like I said, I'm not going to bring up differences between the books and the movies, because even though I do know some differences, I haven't read the books. So basically, we're just going to be looking at how they're structured. So you've got the Star Wars original trilogy, Luke Skywalker being trained in the ways of the Jedi to take on Darth Vader and take down the Empire. The story of the Lord of the Rings, Frodo Baggins, a hobbit, comes into possession of the One Ring of Sauron, and now he and a bunch of other people now have to take it to Mount Doom to destroy it and to gather up all the armies to fight the big orc army of Sauron. Now, there is a big difference between the two trilogies. With Star Wars, there is an overarching story that's combining all 3 of them, but each movie also has their own individual story in each installment. With the Lord of the Rings trilogy, yeah, there are individual stories in each installment, but the focus is really more on the overarching story, tying all 3 of them together. Now, like I said, each installment does have their own specific focus, like forming the Fellowship in the first book, taking on Saruman and getting the human armies in the second one, and then the actual big battle and destruction of the ring in the third one. But like I said, it's more focus is really on the overarching story, with combining all 3 of them. So, but each Star Wars story, we know that there is an overarching story, but each installment's individual stories that really stand out on their own. So, in a way, I'm going to have to give this one to you know what? Hold on. So yeah, like I said, while the Star Wars stories do have their each own installments with their own stories, just the big epicness of the overarching story in Lord of the Rings is what really makes it a grand epic piece. I mean, they're all filmed at the same time. They just were released in separate years. So, and the great epicness of what the whole trilogy is really about is really in Lord of the Rings, and that's what makes it so memorable. So I'm going to give this one to Lord of the Rings. Now let's move on to round 2, the cast. Now the cast of Star Wars is, of course, Luke Skywalker, the boy that's trained in the ways of the Jedi, Princess Leia, the leader of the Rebel Army, C-3PO, R2-D2 the droids, the smuggler, Han Solo and his friend Chewbacca. You've got old Obi-Wan Kenobi, Yoda, who trained Luke in the ways of the Force, And you have the villain, Darth Vader, as well as Emperor Palpatine, who is the actual ruler of the entire Empire. Now, with Lord of the Rings, you've got the Hobbits, Frodo, Sam, Merry Pippin, Legolas, the elf, Gimli, the dwarf, Aragorn, the human. You've got the wizard Gandalf. You've got Sauron, who is the big giant eye of evil. You've got his basically second command Saruman, an evil wizard, and there's a bunch of other characters in these movies, including Gollum. So yeah, there's a lot of characters in this trilogy. And while we all know who the characters are in Lord of the Rings, everyone who's not really much of a movie fan would actually know the names of the Star Wars characters just based on how popular and recognizable they are. Now, the Lord of the Rings cast did a very good job in their performances in the movie. But well, with the cast of Star Wars, they also did a pretty good job at the time that these movies were made. I mean, you're with Luke with the realization of Darth Vader is his father. You're with these characters during their emotional torments, especially when in The Empire Strikes Back. So, with that being said, I'm going to have to give this round to Star Wars. Alright, so 2 of the 5 rounds down. Let's get to the next one. The special effects and action. Now, the Star Wars movies are impressive, and most of the stuff in those movies hold up pretty well. However, when it comes to action, it's fun, but there's room for improvement. Now, of course, you've got the battle with Luke and Darth Vader in Return of the Jedi. You've got the big, ship against AT-ATs on the planet Hoth. You've got the big Death Star destruction in the first one. So there's fun stuff, but the action in Lord of the Rings is on a whole nother level. I mean, especially in the final movie with the big battle in Return of the King. And I have to bring up Smeagol, aka Gollum, because that's still some of the best CGI effects that I've seen in movies ever. And that's played by Andy Serkis, the motion capture performer. Motion capture? Yeah. And so with CGI, there's always a chance that it'll seem dated in a few years, but the special effects in Lord of the Rings still holds up really well, and those things age and are more recognizable than practical effects in the original Star Wars trilogy. And of course, like I said, the action is on a whole nother level. You feel the intensity. I'm not trying to take anything away from the action in Star Wars, but there is the scene where old Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Vader just touching lightsabers, not really fighting, just touching like old men. But like I said, there are other actually fun scenes with action in the Star Wars trilogy, but as you can tell, I'm going to have to just go with Lord of the Rings on this one. So, round goes to the fantasy people. Now let's go on to the 4th round, the atmosphere. So basically, how well are these movies at establishing the world that these movies are set in? Do you actually feel what they're trying to get with you? Star Wars, it's in a galaxy far, far away, a long time ago, but still somehow futuristic. It's a fantasy story with science fiction stuff. So anyway, you really get into the whole rebels against the Empire. You see several different types of alien species. You actually feel like this is pretty cool. And the world that Star Wars has set up can be very addicting to what you want to know about it, how does this work. There's basically an answer for almost anything. Lord of the Rings, they also do a very good job with Middle Earth and the land of Mordor, with the human kingdoms, the elves, the dwarves, the hobbits. So, and there's a lot of scenic shots in Lord of the Rings that are really great, probably paid by the Tourism Board of New Zealand. But considering just okay, so here's the thing. Like I said, I promised I wasn't really gonna bring that much attention to the books, but this is sort of where it comes into play. You see, the movies are adaptations of books that have been around for over 50 years at this point. So, the establishment of this world, there was like blueprints for Peter Jackson when he went out to make these movies. Like he knew what he was kind of supposed to do, what he wasn't supposed to do. When George Lucas went out with the original Star Wars trilogy, it was basically from scratch. I mean, he had inspiration from several different sources, including a French graphic novel, Valerian, and a bunch of space opera stuff like Flash Gordon, I believe. But in terms of actually creating his own specific galaxy world thing, it was, for the most part, a lot original concepts and stuff he just had to do on his own, which is a little bit more impressive. And considering how interactive and immense people can get into the world of Star Wars, I'm going to have to give this one to them. So, 2-2 tie. Let's get to the final round. The one that'll determine everything. The one round to crown victor. That was not well worded. Anyway, round 5. Legacy. Now, like I said at the beginning of this movie face-off, these two franchises have immense influence on American pop culture. And not just American pop culture, too. Lord of the Rings, since it's written by a British author, J.R.R. Tolkien, has also had a lot of staying power, a lot of a huge celebrity status in Great Britain as well. And Star Wars is really well loved all around the world, as well as Lord of the Rings. So it's really hard to determine which one probably has the biggest legacy. I mean, both franchises are considered by still some people today to be like nerd stuff. Like, it's not really all that cool to know what's going on with these two franchises. But basically, in recent years, that's really not been the case because Disney now has Star Wars. Now, you can't find a person that doesn't love talking about Star Wars. And you've got Lord of the Rings, and even though it's been a while since the original trilogy came out, they still came out with their own prequel movies with The Hobbit, which people aren't really big of. But that did spark, again, renewed interest in the franchise, and there's now talk about a TV show. So, and regardless of how you feel about that news, the fact that they are thinking of doing a TV show shows just how popular this franchise still is. However, Star Wars has multiple different shows, video games, novelizations, comics, and Lord of the Rings does have video games as well. And, well, when you see a picture of Darth Vader, you know that's Darth Vader. You know where he's from. Show you a picture of the Eye of Sauron, you might be able to get it. In fact, most people probably will get it, but there's just something about Star Wars that's just become much more dominant than a lot of franchises. And while Lord of the Rings is close behind, the fact that it's now owned by Disney just shows that it's still immensely influential and very powerful in terms of staying power and influence in other franchises as well. So, yeah, I'm going to have to give this one to Star Wars. The round and the face-off go to Star Wars. Now, yeah. But you know what's just, even though Star Wars won the face-off, you know what's still just as awesome? Lord of the Rings! So yeah, even though I just crowned Star Wars the winner, like I said, it is a little bit subjective. I mean, I still really love Lord of the Rings, and there will be some times where I prefer to pop in a Lord of the Rings movie, if I have the DVDs, rather than Star Wars. But like I said, it's still a little bit subjective at the end of the day. I just gave you my thoughts. So comment down below with yours. Like, share, subscribe, and Dr. Cinema with the One Ring and with the power of the Force. I'll see you sometime soon.